news? Well, this is like 2 weeks later, and we are still discussing the depiction of Cleopatra in film and video. I opened up my Yahoo News feed the other day, and there were still more stories about the ongoing controversy over Cleopatra's race and the arguments with the Egyptian government. I'm like, wow, this is a big story, and it hasn't been going away. So, and also I noticed that I got really good views on that story. It's probably because I was getting this video out the same time the story was popular. And, you know, I'm very bad at business and slow, but we'll get to that another time. But anyway, so I'm like, we're definitely going to revisit this topic. We need to go more into depth since it is still front and center in the news. So, all right. Okay, the race of Cleopatra. It says Macedonian was her race. And we do have a few coins. I don't know if the statue depictions are of that period. They might be later. But the coins for sure are of that time. And we can see from those coins that Cleopatra was no Liz Taylor. She was rather a plain average-looking woman. And see, the interesting thing, so Cleopatra was Macedonian. From the coins, I suppose you could say she looks more Greek, which I guess she was Greek. Maybe Greek, or I don't think she was Roman. But so the Greeks can have darker skin. So I think so Cleopatra wasn't really Egyptian. So it's not that the Egyptians are saying that Cleopatra was a native Egyptian. They're just saying they want her to be historically accurately portrayed because they feel that we have enough information on Cleopatra to know her race and know that her race would have been Greek, Macedonian, and we know her race is not African. That's what I think the Egyptian government and the Egyptian officials are trying to say. Whereas the producers of the Netflix documentary, they're taking more license. They're like, Cleopatra was, maybe they're thinking, oh, she was actually Egyptian or from like the African area. And they're taking more license with it. Whereas the Egyptians are saying that no, she was Macedonian, and we know she's Macedonian, so your portrayal is incorrect. Now, an interesting thing that I saw in the articles that maybe the African woman who played the part said that, we need to have more African queens in movies because it means a lot to her and her daughter. Okay, I guess I understand her point. Well, hopefully she's not a Republican and not an anti-monarchist. It's funny how people are, there's different people that are anti-monarchists, but I'm wondering if they really have princess parties for their children. Huh. Interesting. So, okay. But also the thing is here, it seems to be historical. Historical accuracy seems to be an issue. And so I said the Egyptians are saying that, obviously the white people have, taken Cleopatra and interpreted her themselves. And so what they're complaining about is now they're saying that the Africans, black people, are taking Cleopatra and interpreting her in their way. And so the Egyptians want her to be portrayed as accurately as we can, tell that she is from history. Like I said, like with the coins and different things. So I understand the point that the African community wants to, find his heroic characters, I guess Cleopatra, she was a strong character. But they want to find strong characters to be role models for the next generation. But Egypt is saying, if it's not true, then, you're taking our person just to make you feel good. So I said, it's very tricky. I said, now if this was back in the days of Golden Age Hollywood, nobody thought of it. You would think about having accurate, they do think of historically accurate things, but they're not thinking of racial accuracy. So, because even back then there were all these rules against the races interacting in this way and that way. So, in the old days, it was you were an actor, so you could play any race, basically. These days, we don't look at it that way. So that's why it's a controversy today, but it wasn't as much of a controversy, like 60 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. I'm sure it was somewhat controversial, but not to the level it is today, where everyone is more consumed with racially correct, ethnically correct portrayals on screen. So it's really important today, and it wasn't as important in the past. It's cultural. It's how things have changed. So I think the response that Egypt has of producing their own film or series on Cleopatra is probably the best response to have. Because, they can't obviously stop Netflix from making their version, or they can't stop the black community from doing their version of Cleopatra, or I guess they can't stop the white community from doing their version of Cleopatra. Like I said, they're different countries, totally different countries, so it's out of their jurisdiction. But like I said, Egypt can do their own films or documentaries and say, okay, this was made by the official Egyptian government, this is sanctioned by Egypt, and Cleopatra is our character, and this is how she was, as close as to how she really was in real life that can possibly be. So in the end, they will feel that having Egypt tell their own story about their own past queen will be the most credible, and then other people throughout the world will say, okay, this is the real version, Egypt's version is the real one, but okay, there's the white peoples with Liz Taylor, and there's the, the Sarah Bernhardt did a Jewish Cleopatra, and, the Adele James did the black Cleopatra, and those other countries, they did their versions, but those were just, fictionalized, and Egypt is putting out the correct historical version. So I think that's the right approach, because how else are you going to, you're not going to really get them, other countries, to pull their versions. You just do your own. And like I said, and with backing it with, all the Egyptologists and the Egyptian government, I think that will ultimately send a message to whoever is watching the Cleopatra that this is the official national Egyptian version of Cleopatra and the most accurate one that exists. So I think they're on the right track. They make their own. Other people just do their own thing. What can you do but what other people do? But do their own. So yes, now I'm intrigued. I'm interested to see these things. And yeah, it's publicity. So probably a lot of people are digging out Cleopatra movies about now. Now, it's interesting that Cleopatra is supposed to be a famed beauty, but in reality, she was a pretty average woman. And they were saying that different historians sort of portrayed her as especially seductive and glamorous anyway. And she was a woman who really fascinated men. Now, I think that's probably true. But maybe, like I said, obviously it wasn't for her beauty, at least not from what we can see from these coins. So what I'm thinking is that she was probably, being a queen, in those days, women didn't do a lot of things. And women were regarded as property. So for a strong woman, I think she would be sort of almost like a feminist, or almost like a hippie, someone who was more into the free love or something. She had affairs with this guy and that guy, and she was the queen and stuff. So I'm thinking that possibly her more liberal love attitude and her power, so her personality, she was probably like a feminist type of her day, and the men might have found that very sexy. And that is why her reputation as a sex goddess has prevailed throughout history, because she was different than the usual women who were just property of the men. She was a strong woman, she was a queen, and like I said, she had lovers and everything. And so I imagine she also had an interesting personality, a strong personality, which was something that probably wasn't seen very often back in ancient times. So I said, so if we're wondering how, like, the coins show that she was sort of average, or maybe below average looking, but she still created this aura of glamour and sensuality that has gone throughout the centuries, I would have to, like, put it down to her personality, her power, her strength, maybe her liberal views on love, which were, like said, thousands of years ahead of her time. So yes, I understand that the different races want to find historical queens to boost the morale of their people. And I'm sure there are lots of queens. I'm sure there are lots of African queens and queens in every nation, because all governments used to be monarchies throughout history. So that would be an interesting project we could do, go through history and look for the kings and queens in all the different nations. But here's another thing, though, with Cleopatra. Probably it's not just a matter of kings and queens, but a matter of influential kings and queens on the world stage. So we'll say that's another reason why we'll say that the white people or the black people have wanted to co-opt Egypt's Queen Cleopatra, because Cleopatra is super famous, and she remains super famous to this day. And that's why everybody wants to make a movie about her and put their own people in it. So that's another reason why Cleopatra gets picked on, because she was just so famous. But yes, we should try to find our own kings and queens, historically accurate, and focus on them, and not try to, take kings and queens from other countries. But yeah, so these are all issues that, we didn't have, the acting world didn't deal with as much many, many moons ago. It used to be all just, you're an actor, you play whatever, you're the wrong ethnicity, just put on some body paint. And these days it's totally not acceptable. But in throughout history, it was. But yes, I am ethnically European, and of course they had plenty of kings and queens. But the matter is, these days, what does it really matter? Even like in your family history, if your DNA, okay, maybe you had some nobles in the past. What lessons does it bring you today? The lesson you're going to learn from the king or the queen is you're going to learn, what did they do wrong, what did they do right? The same lessons you learn from anybody. So, even take Queen Elizabeth, for example. We just had Queen Elizabeth. Just because I am similar ethnicity to her doesn't mean that's the only reason I draw inspiration from her accomplishments. What I take away from her is, her grace, her dignity, her personality. Because I said with me, I'm sort of a kind of person that just sort of goes off and goes crazy about things. But you see how her calm demeanor, and she's very diplomatic. She's able to, interact with kings, queens, presidents, just the way she conducts herself is an inspiration to me. And, I think she's a wonderful role model. So I don't think you have to share the same ethnicity to be inspired by an individual. Okay, in conclusion, like I said, I love Egyptology. It's always been fascinating to me. And I said, Egypt is just like the star country of history. It's just like the star, the ultimate historical star. Who isn't just fascinated with the pyramids and the history? Sometimes I just sit and watch documentaries on Egyptian history, and I'm like, wow. And of course, and it's funny, in my little hometown paper this week, we saw an ad. There was an ad for a in-person lecture by the Dr. Zahi Hawass in Philadelphia. And I'm like, oh, Philadelphia's the other side of the state. What's it doing in our little paper over by Pittsburgh? But anyway, so wish I was over there. Because, I just love him. He's so cool. I see him on all these documentaries, and he's just very charming. But anyway, and I said, just like with history, just like there's the British royal family is the star of the European royals, and just like the Barrymores are the actor stars of the theater, whatever, just like, so like I said, Egypt is the historical star, is the star of history, and we're all fascinated by it, and yes, so, well, we hope that this situation can get resolved to everyone's satisfaction, and we will look forward to seeing the Egyptian-produced film on Cleopatra. I said, I wonder, I don't know if have they done one before? I know, like I said, America's done plenty, and theater and other countries have done stories on Cleopatra for many years. But yes, has Egypt done a film on Cleopatra before? Very interesting. So we'll be looking forward to that and seeing what they have to show us. All right, thank you so much for watching. You have a wonderful day. Let freedom ring.